Kaine is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two items that I want to talk about. One, some good news. Mr. Painter, you challenged us at the end of your opening testimony, hey, don't just be finger pointing at each other, get something done. And I do think we have to say this hearing is within the still recent aftermath of two really powerful pieces of legislation that Congress has passed to help us battle climate change, to help the United States become leaders in the battle against climate change. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, a number of my colleagues worked hard on this bill, makes significant investments in all kinds of infrastructure. The nation needs it, but including clean energy infrastructure. And then the Inflation Reduction Act, which was partisan, it passed by one vote in the Senate, also really rockets the United States ahead in climate leadership by promoting investments in clean energy. We've seen the effect of this in Virginia. Virginia was one of the worst states in the country in terms of any embrace of wind or solar low carbon energy, at the same time as we were one of the states most vulnerable to sea level rise. But now in both wind deployment offshore, Virginia is becoming a leader not only in deploying wind offshore, but also in becoming a hub of manufacturing of offshore wind components, good for the economy. But also in the solar space, Virginia has moved from sort of bottom 10 deployment to top 10. So the efforts of disinformationists notwithstanding, it's not like Congress has just basically accepted the disinformation and gridlocked. We've taken action, and we can debate too hot, too cold, just right, more steps to take. I believe we do need to take more steps. But I do think Congress is acting on this, and we're acting on it in a way that is rocketing ahead great American innovation, creating jobs, putting us in a position where we can encourage others to do the same, a global leadership position, and I think that's important. And then the other point I wanted to make was with respect to something that Mr. Walter said in his testimony, because I don't want anybody watching this to be confused or disinformed. You used a phrase that said the left wants to silence. The left wants to silence speech it doesn't like. We're talking about disclosure. We're not talking about silencing anyone. Dr. Pilkey said it's important to know resources can pervert research. And those resources could come from the left or the right or from anywhere or from foreign sources. It could pervert research. And you said it's really important that on research you be able to figure out if there's a conflict of interest. Resources can pervert campaigns. Mr. Painter, you talked about watching it from the George W. Bush administration through and seeing the effect on campaign contributions and dark money perverting campaigns. Research can pervert the reputation of the Supreme Court. When people appearing before the court are hosting members of the court on luxury vacations who then choose not to disclose it, there is a possibility that worries Americans that justice is being perverted. So who would argue that we shouldn't rout out conflicts of interest? And if we can't eliminate them all, at least we can make them transparent so that voters and citizens and legislators and journalists can figure out what's going on. That's why the American public overwhelmingly supports the Disclose Act. If you look at polling, Republican, Independent, Democratic, everybody believes they should have the right to know who's funding campaigns. Even a person who may never go look at the website to determine who's doing it still thinks they have the right to it, and that should they want to, that information should be there for them. And that's why I'll go back to what my colleague, Senator Merkley, was saying. I don't believe for an instant that if you added up the total of dark money, it's a more significant problem on the Democratic side than the Republican side, because all Democrats are very wanting to get rid of dark money because all Democrats support the Disclose Act. And since Mike Castle was defeated in a Republican primary for Senate in Delaware in 2010, I don't think we've had a single Republican member of either the House or the Senate who has been willing to support the Disclose Act. Those who are willing to say, let it all be transparent, are not trying to silence anyone. They're trying to actually provide the best information to everyone, while those who insist upon opacity, insist upon secrecy, resist transparency, they got something to hide. They got something to hide. And so my hope is, I just resonate with what Dr. Pilkey said. We ought to be able to determine, wherever we are, everyday people, journalists, elected official, expert, whether there's a conflict of interest that could threaten the credibility of information that we receive. Everybody ought to be able to determine that. And we get there by doing things like the Disclose Act, and it would be my hope that at some point we would be able to get some Republican votes to back that up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.